All right, guys, here we go. So Ted Cruz talked about the Democrats doing well in the election. And look, shock, shock, he may have an analysis here that I agree with. I might not agree with the words he uses, but the sentiment behind it might be correct. So apparently, this is what the tweet says. Why did the Democrats do better than expected? Because for 2 years, they have governed as liberals. They've governed as whacked-out lefty nut jobs. You know what that did? That excited their base. That excited a bunch of young voters. All right, so let's see what he actually says in his full context.
Up our sleeves and governing, and here's a lesson to take from last night. Look, why did the Democrats do better than expected? Because for 2 years, they've governed as liberals. They've governed as whacked-out lefty nut jobs, and you know what that did? That excited their base. That excited a bunch of young voters that came out in massive numbers because when you actually stand for something, your base gets excited. There's a lesson for Republicans to learn, which is when we have a majority next year, we damn well better act like it and use it. We need to up our sleeves.
Okay, no. So here's where he's wrong. Ted, your ideas, the Republican ideas, are unpopular. It just happens to be that the left ideas are popular. So yeah, I get it. Super serving your base is usually a good idea, but you know, the economic ideas that these guys run on, that even their own base doesn't like that. I'm sure they like the social conservatism and the religiosity and things of that nature, but they don't like the right-wing stuff. Anyway, look, I digress. Look, the core of what he's saying there is actually correct. Now, the main reason, I would argue, why Democrats did well is Republican extremism and Republican authoritarianism. So when I say extremism, I mean they're denying the election. A lot of them still deny the 2020 election, talk about wanting Trump back in there. It was a question mark as to whether or not they would contest this election if they didn't do well. So that was a big red flag to a lot of Americans, I think. The Republican authoritarianism is the right-wing Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, which was deeply unpopular. Sprinkle in there, 157 of them in the House voting against gay marriage, 195 voting against a right to contraception. So those were the two biggest reasons, I would argue, as to why Democrats did well. Now, so that had nothing to do with Democrats, really. That just had to do with you guys sucking, Ted. You guys sucked. But there are other factors, and those other factors are very important as well. So if we're given numbers here, I'd say about 60% of why Democrats did well is what I just described. Republican extremism and Republican authoritarianism makes the Democrats look normal and reasonable when you compare them to Republicans. But the other 40%, he's right about that. Now, they weren't lefty, whack jobs or whatever the fuck he said. No, they were actually materially improving people's lives. And those are left ideals and left goals. So, for example, under the Biden administration, for the first time in my lifetime, you actually have an onshoring of jobs. My whole life, every president, Democrat and Republican, they outsource. Trump pretended like he was going to be anti-outsourcing, but under his administration, 200,000 jobs were outsourced. Under Biden, 350,000 jobs have been onshored. That's a big deal. By the way, this is exactly why Democrats overperformed in the industrial Midwest colossally. Fetterman crushed Oz. Shapiro crushed Mastriano. Even Tim Ryan massively overperformed Biden and overperformed in the polls. He ended up losing to J.D. Vance, but the Democrats had a comeback, and that was in Ohio. But like Michigan, for example. In Michigan, Whitmer won, and Democrats now hold the state legislative bodies. The massive overperformance is because we are onshoring jobs. Bringing back, microchip manufacturing, for example, electric cars. There's now actual movement towards economic patriotism. And I don't give a fuck what the reason is. Maybe they think for national security reasons to distance ourselves from China, we have to do it. I don't care what the reason is. It's the right policy. So Democrats were rewarded because they're actually onshoring jobs. That's a big deal, and people need to know that. They need to understand that, and they need to continue with this momentum going forward, because you will win elections the more you do for American workers. So that was a big thing. The other big thing, look, it was just halted by a court, so at least temporarily it's been struck down. We'll see. It's going to be appealed, and they're going to keep fighting for it. But the student loan debt reduction was huge. It helped 40 million Americans. 40 million. 90% of the people who were helped make $75,000 a year or less. It's $10,000 of student loan debt reduction for some people. For others with Pell Grants, $20,000. That's a massive help to a lot of people, man. It really is. It really is. So in other words, they materially delivered for people, and people delivered for them. So he's not wrong. He's just wrong with the negative descriptors, right? He gives it a negative spin, negative connotation of like, they governed like lefty nut jobs and fired up their base. No, they governed in a way that materially helped Americans economically, and they were rewarded for that. So yes, young people did turn out in big numbers, but others did too. Others did too. So, but look, what I would say to Cruz is, yeah, if you go ahead, you super serve your base, go all in super serving your base. If it's more economic shit, they're going to turn on you again because you don't help people. It's quite the opposite. This is a party that was openly running on cutting Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. People don't like that. People don't like that. They might like your shit on, your forcing of your religious beliefs and ideals onto others. The far right base does like that. But I don't think they like being economically screwed over any more than the left does. So anyway, there you have it. He's kind of right, but, the way he describes it, of course, comes with the Ted Cruz weaselly baggage. And that makes it wrong. But in terms of, hey, you excited your base, that part is true. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.